Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Daniels in the King 5 newsroom. It is Super Tuesday in America as people go to the polls in 14 different states to talk about who they'd like to see run for president on the Democratic and Republican sides. Not much of a debate tonight about who that Republican nominee will be, but obviously a lot of people talking about who the Democratic nominee will be based on what is happening across this country as polls are now officially closed in multiple states, including now California. And we're going to talk about it here over the next half hour with our King 5 News political analyst, Ron Sims, of course, the former King County executive and Obama administration appointee, and Scott McClellan, who is the former Bush White House press secretary. We'll talk with both of them here in just a second. But let's talk about the up-to-date delegate count as far as the race for the Democratic nomination. And Joe Biden right now up on top with 268 pledged delegates. Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont, 186 at last count, and Michael Bloomberg and Elizabeth Warren are both trailing. Again, 14 states up for grabs tonight. But the early discussion, as we have been talking about on King 5, has been about Joe Biden, who was left for dead by many pundits just a week ago and is tonight smiling. Here's what he had to say to supporters before he was interrupted. So again, that was Biden in Los Angeles before he was interrupted by some protesters. I think everybody's still trying to figure out what that is all about. But he went on to talk about this night and how many states it looks like he has won, including performing extremely well in the Deep South. And so now I ask you, Ron and Scott, we've been talking about this now for a few hours as we've watched these polls close. What are your initial thoughts about what you've seen tonight? Ron, you want to go first?
This was a very good night for Joe Biden. He proved that he could win not only he won Massachusetts, which is Senator Warren's state, and I think that she will have a pretty substantial decision to make because she lost her state to Joe Biden. But he's had a good night. He's done well in the South, which is really, really important because you need to win there and you need to show you can win there, and he's done that. And he went from what people were basically saying, Joe Biden is done, he's over, to the lead candidate in this race.
Scott?
How quickly the narrative changes in 1 week. That's politics for you. And look what South Carolina did for Joe Biden. It has really propelled him well past just Saturday. It propelled him into tonight, and the endorsements he picked up from Buttigieg and Klobuchar. He is having a very good night. We'll see where things end up in Texas with 228 delegates at stake. Looks like it's going to be pretty close, and we'll see how those delegates break out in the end. And then we're going to start finding out California results here very soon. And if he keeps it close there, I think Joe Biden's going to finish the night ahead in the delegate race and be the new front runner in this race. And a week ago, everybody was looking at today as saying this may be when Bernie Sanders' lead becomes insurmountable because of the number of delegates at stake, a third of the delegates at stake today. Interesting night. It has been a Super Tuesday, I think, for Joe Biden following his breakout performance in South Carolina.
Yeah, it has changed rather quickly. It seems like he was left for dead up even 72, 96 hours ago. He won Minnesota tonight, it appears, where Amy Klobuchar, as you know, had a stronghold. And an interesting point that has been floated out there, he didn't even really campaign in Minnesota. He was outspent $13 million. Michael Bloomberg spent just on ads in that state. And Bernie Sanders had campaigned there. And lo and behold, it looks like Joe Biden is going to win that easily. So that endorsement really paid off in more ways than one in Minnesota. But we're also going to talk about Bernie Sanders tonight, who has done well in the West. He's expected to do well in the Washington state primary as well in a week. He won in Utah and in Colorado tonight. And a short time ago, he addressed supporters.
But tonight, I tell you with absolute confidence, we are going to win the Democratic nomination. And we are going to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of this country. We are going to win. We are going to defeat Trump because we are putting together an unprecedented grassroots, multi-generational, multiracial movement. It is a movement which speaks to the working families of this country who are sick and tired of working longer hours for low wages and seeing all new income and wealth going to the top 1%.
That was Bernie Sanders addressing supporters a short time ago. I think we've been talking throughout the evening that if you're a Sanders supporter, you're still really waiting on Texas and California, the delegate-rich states, the two biggest prizes of the night. Texas, though, appears to be rather close. Scott, I know you spent a lot of time there with many campaigns in Texas. As you look at these numbers come in tonight, what exactly are you looking at?
Well, keep in mind the Democratic primary in Texas, they split it up by the senatorial districts. A large chunk of the votes, or delegates, I should say, 179 delegates or so, are decided by those 31 senatorial districts. So you want to look at the senatorial districts because the candidate that wins the state still may not get a substantial more votes than everybody else, or delegates than everybody else does. And right now it looks like it's still a toss-up in Texas whether or not Sanders wins it or Biden wins it. Sanders has the lead. There's still a lot of votes to come in some of the bigger areas in Texas and some other outlying areas as well. So I'm very interested to see how those votes are split up among those senatorial districts as well as the at-large for the statewide finish.
Yeah, Ron, what do you make of the fact? I think a lot of Sanders supporters waiting on California. He's probably going to do well in Washington, probably going to do well in Oregon, but we were sitting here a couple of weeks ago and it looked like the Bernie story was being written, that he was going down a certain path and leading the way here.
I think that he still is very strong, and he got caught. There were some surprises this evening that I don't think anybody anticipated. If somebody told me that they knew what we're seeing this evening was going to occur, I would say, no, you didn't. You couldn't. You wouldn't have seen Biden's strength in a number of places. We would not have seen the Senator Warren moving, I wouldn't call it negatively, but she is not as strong a candidate as she was when the campaign started. And California will be California, but there's a lot of other states to come in. And but I think that if Joe Biden's even close to going 50-50 with Senator Sanders in California, that is a huge statement. That's a very significant change. I would be interested in seeing what part of the states that take place in.
Well, let's hear now from Joe Biden. You saw the interruption, but here's what he did have to say to supporters.
Like we did in South Carolina, like we did across America today, like we'll do all the way to the White House. Look, that's why I was so proud yesterday being embraced by Amy Klobuchar. We won Minnesota because of Amy Klobuchar. And we're doing well in Texas because of Beto O'Rourke. And that's why I was so proud, so incredibly proud to have Mayor Pete's endorsement as well. There's a man of character, intellect, and courage. And by the way, I was proud to be endorsed by Jim Clyburn. Man, he is something else. Look, our campaign reflects the diversity of this party and this nation. And that's how it should be, because we need to bring everybody along. Everybody. We want a nominee who will beat Donald Trump, but also keep Nancy Pelosi the Speaker of the House.
So Joe Biden talking a lot about endorsements there, and the late endorsements that he got from Amy Klobuchar in Minnesota, Beto O'Rourke in Texas. Perhaps that plays a role tonight. You've both been veterans of these campaigns. Why do endorsements matter? Do voters really listen to the endorsements?
Yes. It's really interesting when you don't have endorsements. People don't think you're a viable candidate. When you tell people who you are, who've endorsed you, all of a sudden you become viable, and the more you have, the more viable you become. So endorsements are necessary in political life. They are a stamp of approval, a good seal of approval. They work very well for the candidates that get them. And there has never been a successful candidate who has not gone out to try to get endorsements. It's becomes second nature to you. It's having somebody say that you're worth being in office, or worthy enough to be in office, or going to work hard enough, or that they respect you enough to support your desire to be in office is really key, and it sells well with the public. I used to doorbell, and in my first campaign, people would say, "Do you have any endorsements?" Well, I didn't have any. I was running against an incumbent, and nobody wanted an endorsement. I lost. So I learned after a while, get as many endorsements as you can, because it's a stamp of approval.
And we saw that in South Carolina pretty clearly.
Absolutely. Some endorsements matter more than others. And in South Carolina, Congressman Jim Clyburn, his endorsement was incredibly big and important for Joe Biden. I do not think you have that result without that endorsement. He is a highly respected congressman in South Carolina. You have a turnout in that primary of more than 50% among African American voters, and he delivered in a big way. Klobuchar, she's going to be getting a lot of credit for Minnesota tonight. She delivered in a short amount of time, just endorsing yesterday when Bernie Sanders was there last night thinking he still had a chance to win Minnesota. They are very disappointed about that. We'll see in Texas. Beto O'Rourke is not helping him so much so far in his home congressional district in El Paso, but the state of Texas, it's still a toss-up right now.
Yeah, we're running through some of the numbers as you were speaking, Scott, there out of Vermont. That was widely expected that Senator Sanders would win his home state, but Joe Biden got a very early boost as well from Virginia. And as you look at some of those numbers on the screen, the Deep South went for Joe Biden. Alabama, we saw Oklahoma, a large segment of the African American community in some of the southern states voted for Joe Biden. That will be one of the stories that comes out of tonight. Tennessee, where they had the polls open a little bit later because of the tornadoes down there, also going for Joe Biden as we look across. Now, Arkansas, 38-22 right now, Biden and Sanders. Bloomberg, this is an interesting point, and Scott, you raised this a couple of times tonight. He's doing well in some of these states in double digits. You had an hypothesis about his input in the races tonight, what that would mean for Joe Biden if he was in or if he was out.
Yeah, I think Joe Biden has had a very good night, and it looks like he'll finish with a very strong night. But if you think of how he would do if Bloomberg had not, how he would have done if Bloomberg had not been in this race, those Bloomberg supporters are not going to Bernie Sanders. He would have taken a substantial number of those voters. Some of them may not have voted. They maybe they're independents. Maybe they wanted to participate in the primary. But this would have been potentially a very big night for Joe Biden if Michael Bloomberg was not in the race. And now, of course, you have reports coming out that Bloomberg is sitting down and reassessing the campaign tomorrow. I suspect he's going to be out of this race pretty soon.
He's opened up all sorts of offices around Washington State, though, Ron, and we still have a primary next week. I mean, what do you think he's thinking about tonight? Whether he's going forward, he won American Samoa. We know that in the caucus tonight, but that's about it.
I think that Mr. Bloomberg is likely to accept the fact that he's not going to be the Democratic nominee. And he may take another course in trying to fund the issues that he feels strongly about politically. But tonight was not kind to him. And he's a smart business person, and I think we will see him over the next several days talk to his consultants, talk to people he's close to, and they're going to tell him your dream's over. I think that he will find a way, as only he can do, to withdraw from the race with a lot of class, and share a lot of his thoughts about where the country should go.
As we continue to look at these numbers again, Ron, you've been talking about the Northeast in particular, Sanders and Warren both being from that area. You're looking at the Maine numbers right now. Elizabeth Warren didn't perform so well in Maine. She hasn't performed well in multiple states, including her own, Massachusetts. What do you think tonight's numbers mean for Elizabeth Warren, who also has established offices here in Washington State, been here a couple of times?
You need to raise money when you're running for office, and if you appear to be viable, you're going to get money. But I think her losses today, where she did not do well today, are going to adversely impact her. And I don't know who's going to be writing the checks to sustain the efforts of a candidate who simply has done not well when she was expected to be one of the top two candidates throughout this entire campaign period. She is not doing well, and she will sit down with her staff as well and decide what they want to do. But I don't see how she's going to get any big check writers anymore until she has I don't know where she's going to win so big that she will have people writing checks again.
Yeah, Scott, I'm curious what you think, because as Ron was just alluding to, Elizabeth Warren's in Michigan tonight. Next Tuesday, not only do we have the primary in Washington State, Idaho, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota. It's a lot of ground to cover.
You do not win the nomination for your party without carrying your home state. You just don't. It doesn't happen. You'd probably have to go back a ways to find someone that has managed to do that. This was a big symbolic blow to her tonight, not to carry Massachusetts. Now, with that said, she did build an incredible amount of support, incredible amount of financial support that has come into her, that was behind her, and her message resonated with some very passionate supporters. She just underperformed when it came to the ballot box, and her team has kind of found 10 different ways to try to say, here's our path to the nomination. It's going to be very hard tomorrow to have a credible explanation for how she could still secure the nomination. I think she will be giving some deep thought to what her next step is, and I don't think it's carrying forward in this race. There's just not a path.
Let's talk about California, which is the big prize of the night, 415 delegates. Gets a little bit wonky in terms of how delegates are issued out based on districts in the state and all that, but we do have those first numbers from California, and gentlemen, you can see them there on the screen. Bernie Sanders had been polling extremely well in the Golden State, 26% in the early returns. Again, these are early returns with 415 delegates at stake. Michael Bloomberg, 20%, Joe Biden, 19%, and Pete Buttigieg at 11%. I'm told that that's with 4% of the vote in, so it is very early, and that is a state that has a population bigger than the entire country of Canada, so it does carry a lot of weight in terms of this whole process and nominating process. Bernie Sanders probably happy with that initial number. Bloomberg, a bit surprising, but he spent how many millions of dollars in California? So those are your first returns from California, which we're still waiting on. 10 states, as we mentioned, it appears have already been decided tonight. Vermont for Bernie Sanders, Virginia for Joe Biden, North Carolina and Alabama, both going to Biden. Maine, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Arkansas, Bernie Sanders, Colorado, Utah. So it's about 7-3 right now as far as the races that have been called, with California and Texas still out there. Pete Buttigieg was just on that list of potential nominees, even though he officially dropped out, supported Joe Biden. There are a lot of people who are picking up their ballots here in Washington State to vote in the primary, and they've got a bunch of people who have dropped out. How does that factor into this nominating process as we go forward? You've both been around conventions. People have voted for somebody who's technically dropped out, but they still have delegates. How does that work at a at a nominating convention like the one that everybody's now talking about on the Democratic side?
You honor the way people voted, and that's how you begin to constitute your delegates. You have to do that. The party loses its credibility if it doesn't do that. The issue will be, I think, the national convention when everybody's gathered, and the debate will be who best beats sitting president of the United States, Donald Trump. Who best beats him? And people will organize around that candidate. And because you want to win, you don't want to go there because you have a philosophical agreement with one candidate and not another. I've been to enough conventions to realize that I didn't like most of the candidates, but I was willing to. No, that's not true. I always liked the candidates. There were just some candidates I loved more than others. Let's put it that way. And but you want a candidate who will win. And there's going to be a lot of money spent this year. It has to be, if on the Democratic side, especially when we're talking about the presidency, on somebody that has the best chance to win when you look at all the polls and when you look at the ability of that person to organize a campaign and raise money.
And superdelegates are in one area versus the delegates, right?
That's correct.
And you've been a superdelegate, so
yes.
you know how that works.
Yeah. A superdelegate is because I was a president of the national county. It wasn't county council, but it was the National County Officials Association, and I was the Democratic representative, and that's why I went. And as a superdelegate, but even then, you were not freelancing. You were talking to other national leaders, and you were talking to members of the state of Washington's delegation and other delegations. So you're not a single voice. You try to figure out where everybody's going, so you can be a part of that flow. You can go with people. You don't want to be on the outside as a complainer. You want to be inside, helping mold and shape policy and work with others. It's like climbing a mountain. Everybody counts on a rope team, and you're on that rope team, but no one ascends to the summit unless you are all working collaboratively and together, and that's what you do in a convention.
Scott, it doesn't matter whether it's Republican or Democrat, but we've already seen in this race the talk about down ballot races. There's a few down ballot races actually in certain states tonight. How does that factor into the bigger scheme of the election of nominating a candidate in either party, and then when people actually go to the polls?
Well, I think it's important. I mean, you look at where the Senate is right now. 3 or 4 races may determine who has the majority in the United States Senate at the end of the day, and who's at the top of the ticket can absolutely affect that and make a difference. If you look at Joe Biden being the more center-left candidate and Bernie Sanders being the candidate on the left of the more progressive wing of the party, that is very much going to be a narrative that you're going to see going forward, in addition to who can just beat Donald Trump. It's who can help elect Democrats down the ballot and who can help ensure that the House stays Democratic and change the Senate to Democratic hands as well. And I think a lot of the party establishment, it's not just party establishment. I think you're seeing tonight that it goes well beyond that there are a lot of moderate, maybe even independent, Democrat-leaning voters out there that are starting to coalesce around Joe Biden in a big way. And again, if Bloomberg was out of this race, it'd be even in a bigger way. And I think after tonight, it will become that. They not only want to beat Donald Trump, but they would like to see their candidates elected in those key battleground races.
Well, and there's still a lot of delegates up for grabs. You need 1991 to win, as you both know, on the Democratic side. Nobody's going to get close to that number tonight. But as you see this, as you look at the math, as Ron, I know you like to look at the map. Are either of these candidates, in Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders, is there math to get them to that 1991, or is this leading into another scenario, but nobody having a majority of delegates?
I think that going into the convention, you don't need the majority of delegates. Going into the convention, you need to have the momentum, and then people come to you. So I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think you're looking for. I think the math is going to be hard to get there by the convention based on the direction of this race. But you're looking to, can you have that separation? Before this week, people were thinking Bernie Sanders might have that, and it would be hard to say he should not be the nominee if he was that far ahead, even though he didn't have a majority or have the 1991 to secure the nomination on the first ballot. Now, maybe that narrative has shifted, and Joe Biden can say, rally behind us. You always want to come out of the convention as united as possible in order to carry yourself into the general election with some momentum. And that's going to, as Ron was just talking about, factor into the discussion come the convention.
You know, we were talking about our ballot here in Washington State off camera, where people are being asked to check a box this year. It was surprisingly a story that didn't get a lot of attention last year when the primary was moved up to March 10th, which is now just a week away. People are sitting around with these at home where they have to check a box. What do you think that's going to mean to overall voter turnout in Washington State when people have to check a box identifying themselves as a Republican or Democrat?
I think that at the separate elections, this was done basically to determine your party affiliation for purposes of voting for a candidate who was either going to be a Democrat and if you check it, a Republican candidate. So this was kind of the way that the state was trying to move away from the old-fashioned caucus system and actually go to a voting system, and this reflects that voting system. We don't have caucuses like other states. We're not the Rhode Islands and other states that you know.
Thankfully, we're not Iowa.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, so this was done in response to basically the Democrats and Republicans saying, we want somebody to sign and say they are a Democrat in order to vote for our nominee, and this mechanism proved to be the most effective.
I think that this benefits the most a lot of political firms out there that are going to be loving having this information. I'm not sure the impact on the vote next week, but I suspect you're going to have some independents that may have participated in the Democratic primary because it is a contested race, and some other swing voters that may be hesitant to do that. I mean, it's on the outside of the ballot, as you pointed out, and I think there are a number of people out there that want to keep that information confidential. And signing it on the outside of the ballots, we'll see what the impact is. It probably hurts Biden more than it hurts Sanders, because Sanders voters are more passionate, and they'll be more willing to check that box.
Interesting.
But it may be interesting to see whether that's what the public backlash or support of this is. I mean, some people felt that because their names, once you sign, your name's on a list that's publicly available to political firms. And there may be people saying, whoa, I'm getting all this mail, I didn't solicit it, and I don't want it anymore. But this was the mechanism used to achieve their name and address and who they declared themselves as, Republican or Democrat.
Well, guess what? I've been told in my ear there are new ballots in that have been counted in California with some new numbers to show us just exactly how Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and the rest are doing in the Golden State. I'm told those numbers are standing by. Yes, there they are. And you can see that Bernie Sanders still holding about 25% of the vote. Michael Bloomberg, who spent a ton of money there, 9% of the ballots now that have been counted. 21%, Joe Biden, 17%, Elizabeth Warren, 11%. There's all sorts of math that we won't get into right now about a 15% threshold and counting delegates and how they're split up. But bottom line, there's going to be a lot of delegates there that'll be factoring into this math long term. And now the discussion, the narrative going forward, perhaps is this a race between a progressive and a moderate? Is that what you think at this point?
Absolutely. It is a two-person race, and it is a race between a progressive, some might say uber progressive. He declares himself a democratic socialist, so that tells you where he falls on the political spectrum. And then someone who's always been viewed, and I think his voting record record and positions bear that out as more in the center of the political spectrum and governing, and someone that would govern toward the center. And so that's how one of the narratives is going to play out. And as Biden's already talking about, we don't need a revolution, we need results. And he's saying, I've got results, I can get it done. Sanders talks about a revolution, but it's not achievable. It's not something that he can actually see get passed in Congress.
Ron, final word?
It's not going to be dull.
You are a man who has not held back any punches tonight, so thank you. Ron Sims, former King County executive, Obama administration official. Scott McClellan, former Bush White House press secretary. Thank you both. That's been an action-packed half hour here on King 5 on this Super Tuesday, 1 week until the Washington State primary. We will talk more coming up tonight on King 5 News. For now, see ya.